I want to respond to a commenter that says that women therapists should not be working with men. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. This commenter says a therapist was recently killed by a madman who was demanding she see him. Also reminds me of the therapist who says she wouldn't see men and they all got together to destroy her life. Males should definitely have to see a male therapist. And if there's none, oh well, women shouldn't be put in danger because males don't want to be therapists. I think she means males don't want to see a therapist, or males prefer to see a woman therapist. Um, so I want to answer this and be respectful. Just a large part of my career has been, um, treating men. So I don't necessarily agree with what this commenter is saying. I understand why she's saying it, but I don't necessarily agree with it. I think whenever you're, as a therapist, when you're treating people and as a client who's going to see a therapist, I think both people need to be comfortable, right? And that's why, my last few years in private practice, I had a very um, detailed process of onboarding clients to make sure that we are a good fit. Like there, almost it was almost next to impossible. I won't say impossible because there was like a couple maybe, but usually it screened out a lot of people that wasn't a good fit for me right at the beginning. So there's that. Uh, but one of the things that I will, in working with people who don't necessarily have the benefit of going to see someone in private practice, so they may have had to come and see me, even in jail, in prison, or in community mental health. I worked at all of those for a long time, and I would still always try to make sure that people were comfortable with seeing somebody like me. And you have men that have been extremely violent, as well as I have to be comfortable and feel safe and working with them. So an example would be like, there's a lot of Aryan Brotherhood guys in prison, and sometimes, whoop, they find themselves on Dr. Jones's caseload, and I'm very much black, and that's not going anywhere. But despite all that, I understand what was going on. And even before I worked in prison, I worked in AB 109 programs and things like that. So that was with inmates and other things, people that were formerly inmates. And I would always ask them, these Aryan guys, listen, I understand. Are you comfortable being on someone like mine's caseload? Is it going to be a problem for you to have a black woman clinician? Every single one of them said no, and they chose to stay, it was always surprising. But a lot of that Aryan stuff is strictly for safety and survival in prison, and doesn't necessarily always reflect how people feel. In spite of that, no one chose to leave my caseload, but I would always have a conversation with them about culture, my blackness, their whiteness, and if we're okay with that. I still had conversations about culture. If I see an Aryan guy in prison linked up with a Mexican guy, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I'm always concerned about that and safety in other ways. Or the fact that just you're a man and I'm a woman, are you okay with that? Is this going to be a problem? Especially with a man who has, you can look at his paperwork and you could see that he has a long trajectory, a long history of being violent towards women. So he obviously has problems with women, or he may have problems with authority. So I always have conversations with them about. But my training too was also very extensive and rigorous. So I have a master's and a doctorate. And part of, my doctoral program, and I don't know if they're still doing this or not, but I feel like, a lot of people go to online schools and such don't have to do this. Part of my training was you had to work with every single populations. So or you had to demonstrate that you at least had work experience in working with every single population. So you couldn't just say, I want to work with kids, if you hadn't worked with adults and geriatric. So I've worked with every spectrum of the population. So I've worked with kids, geriatric, death and dying. I've worked with adults, I've worked with teenagers and things like that. And so, that's part of the reason why a doctoral program is 5 years, is because they want to train you on how to work with every single group of people. Now, so you should be comfortable at the very least being a general practitioner for every group of people. Just like just like doctors now, who doctors, a medical doctor, they might have a specialty, but they should have some general knowledge, foundational knowledge of all groups of people, like general foundational knowledge. And my training was such that you had to work with these every group of people for at least a year. So they weren't playing about that kind of. It was also the same thing with assessment and testing. As a psychologist, you have to learn how to assess and test children versus adults. But when you get out and you do after you've done all the work, then you could sort of niche yourself down, but you should still always have some foundational knowledge on how to work with each group. And so in private practice, when you get niched down in private practice, if you're in private practice, you should be niched down. Then you could say, hey, I treat a specific problem and I prefer to focus on this population of people or this group of people. But you want to be careful in terms of public advertising and what as a business. You should not say, I don't recommend ever saying this, because you can get into a lot of trouble, legal or otherwise, for saying, well, I don't work with white people, or I don't work with black people, or I don't work with men, or I don't work with women, because now you're getting into discrimination. And you can always say, my work works best with women and things like that. But when you start saying that I won't treat you, when you start publicly saying that, then that's grounds for, trouble, legal troubles and things like that. So that's a very slippery slope, in which I think I remember that, but that's not something that I would have publicly said or done. And that's one of those things that she may need to get consultation around. But if you're very niche, then you should be able to treat the problem in a group of people. So for me, I treat abuse, and I've treated abuse in both men and women for many years. And I've also worked with kids and things like that. I've worked with animals, so I've worked with all types of people and animals who have been abused and neglected. And so I feel like I can confidently say that I can treat all groups of people, regardless of sexuality, race, or gender, who are going through abuse. But we have to also make sure that our personalities mesh, we vibe, you're comfortable with me culturally, I'm comfortable with you, that sort of thing. So a lot of good work can be done. And I think a lot of people can have, great corrective emotional experiences, my last year of accepting clients, I had a lot of white folks that wanted to come see me. And, the first thing they ask is like, hey, are you okay with treating white people? I'm fine treating white people. I can treat white, Asian, I can treat them all. This is my problem area. This is what I treat. So I'm fine with that. Now, my niche and my marketing is going to go to whoever my biggest clientele is, but that doesn't mean that I won't see anybody else that doesn't have that problem area. But to each its own. I can't tell other people what to do. But when you're a public business, you want to be careful about things like that, and what you're doing, what your practices are, and what you allow. And you also want to make sure that you're not doing harm both to yourself and to your clientele. So thanks for putting this. No disrespect to the commenter or anybody out there. It's just what I've learned over the years and just what my thoughts are. Of course, Dr. Jones's recommendations and advice is not for everybody. We're all adults here. So I hope that helps. Thanks so much.